Welcome to Emerging Franchise Brands, the podcast that introduces you to the visionary founders of America's fastest growing franchise opportunities. We'll also hear from industry pros as they share insights on what it really takes to achieve the elusive milestone of 100 plus locations. I am your host, Frank Fiume, founder of I9 Sports, and my 20-year journey from inception to acquisition has given me a unique perspective on how to succeed in franchising. Join me as we welcome today's guest. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Emerging Franchise Brands podcast. On today's show, I have James Butler, who is a #1 best-selling author, a keynote speaker, an executive coach, consultant, and trainer. And last but definitely not least, he is the host of Best Franchise Brands podcast. James, how are you? Welcome to the show.
I'm great. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Well, I'm glad now you're on my show. I was on yours recently. I enjoyed our time together. So I'm looking forward to our conversation again.
Thanks for having me.
Well, James, let's start a little bit of background. You know, I know for those of us that have been in franchising a long time, we like to say that franchising found us. So would you share with the audience on how and where did franchising find you?
Well, I've been an entrepreneur for most of my life. Not the entire thing, but I actually graduated from college in microbiology and chemistry. I thought I wanted to do immunology and develop vaccines and do research on that originally. And then I got out of school and I found I really liked selling and I really liked business a lot. So I started my own business with my wife. We ended up building up 3 different retail stores, and I built 5 companies from the startup phase over $1 million a year in revenue. And while I was doing that, I thought about starting a franchise of my own company. But for a lot of reasons, I met with several different attorneys, and I ultimately decided against that. But I've always been very intrigued with franchising. And so I've been in the business a little bit over 5 years now, doing consulting, training, doing a lot of sales training on how to help people be better at selling franchises, because it's a very complicated sale. But I would guess to say, like what you said there, franchising definitely found me. It wasn't something I originally thought I was going to do when I first got into my business career, but I really enjoyed it a lot. I really loved meeting with franchisors, emerging franchisors, existing franchisors, helping them get better at sales, get better at marketing, and understand better how to help their franchisees succeed. I've done a lot of work in systems. I've written 21 books, actually. So one of my books I wrote, probably my best-selling book, is a book called The System is the Secret. And it's a book about the importance of having systems in a business. And one thing I really like about franchising is that systems is everything in the franchise. You have to have that to get an existing operation set up. When you expand, you have to have more of those systems in process as well. So that's really a critical component of that for sure. So this is a copy of that book, The System is a Secret. It's pretty big. It's about 500 pages long. Wow. But it goes through the 16 most important systems in a business. I read the E-Myth when I first got in the business myself. My wife and I started our first company in 2001. And when I started that company, I didn't really know much about systems, but I read this book called The E-Myth, which I think most people who have been entrepreneurs have read at some point. And in that book, Michael Gerber talks about how you have to have systems, but he didn't tell you how to do it. So I wrote that book to actually show you how to put systems in place for your business. And then I've done that for franchisors, executives, a lot of different team members across the country I've done that for as well. So that's kind of how I got into franchising.
Okay. Well, and the E-Myth was life-changing for me and my business as well. I resonated so much with that main character, Sarah. I was living her life as that entrepreneur when I read that book in 2008. And I always say, I couldn't wait to flip the pages of that book to see where my life was going to go. Because there was a certain point in the book where I was exactly at that moment in time, I was where she was. And I was like, I can't wait to see what happens with my business. And it was life-changing for me. I got to go back to something you said early on, though. Here you are in franchising, and training and supporting and coaching and consulting, yet you decided not to franchise yourself. And I'm good with that because I'm a big believer in franchising does not fit everybody's model. And just because I've been in franchising and so many of us doesn't mean that franchising fits everyone. Can you share, though, why you chose not to franchise your business?
Yeah, for sure. It was a retail bridal store. My wife designed wedding dresses, and we would go overseas and manufacture those. And part of the reason why I thought it'd be a good idea to franchise, we could actually put more of our dresses into these other businesses' stores. The challenge was that they were independent. They want to do whatever they wanted to do. They want to carry their own designs. And so ultimately, it was a way to sell dresses, but it really didn't fit the model. I didn't really want to go out there and be a franchisor in that particular industry. And the industry has changed quite a bit as well. The other reason why I thought about that is that people started going direct overseas to buy their own dresses. and they didn't have to have the overhead. And so I didn't think it was a very viable business model for franchise. So that's what ultimately why I decided not to do it. I met with the attorney and I showed him all my systems and my processes and said, "You're the most organized person I've ever seen for doing this. You definitely should do the franchise." But as I thought more about it and talked with some of my friends about why getting into franchising may or may not be the right reason or the best decision for us, ultimately my wife and I decided against that just because the business was changing. And retail is a tough animal anyway for businesses and for franchising, I think, because there's just a lot that goes into that and there's a lot more overhead. And so I think there's a lot of other ways to franchise that are better than within the retail niche. Not to say retail can't be good, but you have a lot more challenges for sure in that particular niche. And so that's ultimately why we decided not to do it.
Yeah. James, what do you think about, what are you observing as some of the most significant changes going on right now in our industry in franchising?
Well, I think customers have become more, or just franchise candidates in general become more skeptical. They're much more hesitant to go ahead and buy. I wrote a book called Franchise Sales Secrets, which I wrote this a couple of years ago about how to increase your sales. And one of the things I talk about in that book is that the game of franchising has changed the way that people are buying franchises. So it's not that they can't buy. There's basically two different categories of people. You have people that have the capacity to buy, and then you have people that have the willingness to buy. And so you might have the credit score, you might have the ability to buy a franchise, but ultimately you don't have the skill set to do a business, be a business owner, or you don't have the time commitment to it. And we've talked about this a little on my podcast as well, is that there's a lot of people that get into franchising that say, okay, I want to be an absentee franchise owner. I'm going to buy this franchise, hire a manager, have them run it for me. But the reality is it doesn't really work that way that well, because most of the time people don't care about the business as much as you do. And I'm just kind of speaking in generalities. While it does work, you can have people, you can hire good managers and run that business and be kind of an absentee, semi-absentee business owner. But you have to be really good at business skills, about training that and making sure that person knows what they're doing. Because if you don't, your business is going to flounder and it's going to struggle. And I think that's probably the biggest thing, is that I think sometimes franchisors in the past have picked people because they have the capacity to buy, but maybe they didn't have the willingness to buy or the willingness to actually operate the business full time. And I think today, franchisors are much more cognizant of that, much more aware of that. And as a result, they're paying more attention to what does this person actually have the ability to do? Do they have the right skill set? Is it a good fit for them? Is it a good fit for us, for our culture? And so that's a really key component for that too. The other big difference, I think, is that people are they're more hesitant to buy just because of their own fears. There's shifts in the economy. People are kind of worried, is this going to be the right business for me? Is this the right thing for me to do right now? And I think in some cases, that fear, that worry, that's the being scared is just causing people to wait and hesitate and do more research and do more investigation of a franchise. So I think and they come into the process, but later in the process too, where it used to be when they would come in, they say, okay, I'm interested in this business. Now they might have looked at several different businesses and they're deciding which one is the right one for them. Sometimes franchisors relying on franchise brokers to do that for them. Other times they're trying to find their own leads and get those. And they just enter the process differently. And so you have to really understand how to get people excited about your brand, your concept, what you do, help them understand how to read an FDD, how to understand how to build a pro forma, how to understand what the business can actually do. And then have them talk with the right franchisees who can actually say, yes, it's a great business for me. I'm glad I joined this franchise. That validation process can kill the sale sometimes if you don't set it up right, or they don't know what they're looking for and understand that as well. So I think those are just a few examples of that. I talk about that a lot more in depth in my book, Franchise Sales Secrets, about how to be successful at selling franchises in today's changing climate and environment that way.
Yeah, the climate is changing an awful lot. In some ways, this kind of feels a little bit, though, again, this is more anecdotal than anything else. This feels a little bit more like 2004, 2005 to me, when we were actually, I feel like we're in like another golden age, though, where the franchisors that are selling franchises are selling a lot of them. And in some cases, they're selling too many that they can't support. And I'm talking on the emerging side. And I don't, whether we want to blame the brokers, blame the franchise sales organizations, private equity, or all of the above, or none of the above, the fact is that it does seem like it is feast or famine, right? You have franchisors that are selling a lot right now. But if you don't have a solid concept, if you don't have a strong enough budget, it's hard to get in the face of potential franchise buyers in today's climate.
Yeah, for sure. And I say this in my book, that I think if you do not have a system for selling franchises, you're at the mercy of the franchise candidate system for not buying. And that's the truth, is they don't have to buy a franchise right now. They can keep looking. And so a lot of times that's really the issue, is that yes, you can have franchise sales organizations sell lots of franchises for you, but if you don't have the system on the back end to support them, they're going to struggle, they're going to fail. And that's not going to be good for you going forward. Your FTD is going to reflect that. And that's going to be a hard thing for you to sell more franchises down the road. So you have to be really thoughtful about what is the long-term consequence of my decision right now? You can get cash flow immediately, but you could be paying out a lot of cash, obviously, to your franchise brokers and things like that too. Again, they all provide a great service.
Sure.
So nothing against them, what they're doing, but I just, you have to be thoughtful about where's my business going to go as a result of doing this? Am I doing my own lead generation? I'm depending on someone else to do all my lead generation for me. Where do I want my business to be down the road? That's a really critical component to think about as you grow your business.
Yeah, I want to make a correction on something I said a little while ago. I mentioned brokers and FSOs and private equity, but truthfully, founders are also just as guilty of selling too many franchises, putting the pressure on their team of selling too many franchises when they don't have the capacity to support them. So it is a full team effort when it comes to awarding or selling franchises.
Right.
James, I want to kind of shift gears, thinking about who my audience is. It's mostly made up of emerging founders or people looking to franchise their concept, as well as people, of course, looking to buy franchises. What do you think are some of the key factors specifically to contribute to the success of an emerging franchise brand? How do they get out of emerging and get into becoming a mature brand? What are some of the linchpins to that?
Well, I think a key component of that is being on the right franchisees in the very beginning. That's key, because if you bring the wrong culture, that's going to push people away from wanting to be a part of your organization. If you pick the right people and the right culture and you form that really early in the brand, you're going to attract people to you because of who you are. And I think that's a big part of what branding actually is standing for something people that's meaningful to them, that they can be excited about and they can see what it is you're doing. You have a great section in your book, Running with Your Head Down, which is a fantastic book. If you haven't read this book, you should read this one. But there's a great section there where you talk about Under Siege. That chapter on Under Siege is so good, because I think this speaks to what your question is about. When you guys are making that decision to expand, and you had all those things happen in a row, where you had your annual conference and you had all these different things happen, where you had the radio host go after you and your brand, what you guys are doing. That's a pretty scary thing. And I think emerging franchisors feel that for sure. They feel that under siege all the time. And you have to have something you stand for that everyone and you and your employees can all stand for. I like that part in your book where you talked about how you got everybody together and said, hey, this is who we are, this is what we're all about.
Yeah.
I would imagine that was a defining moment for you, because people could see we can overcome any obstacle that's coming up if we stick together, we band together, we are all on the same team, we all have the same things we're standing for, the same values we're standing for. That's a critical component. As you know, most franchisors don't get above 100 franchisees. So the first thing you need to focus on is that initial 10 to 20 or 25 franchisees. Are they the right people? I think, again, most people that just get into franchising, they want to get their first franchise sold. They bring on anybody who has capital, and it may or may not be the right person. You have to really think about, is this person going to validate well? Are they going to say good things? They follow my system? A lot of people who want to be in business owners, they want to have a proven system, but there are some people that just want to do their own thing anyway. And that's not the right kind of person to bring onto a brand new franchise.
Right.
You have to have the right people who can actually follow the system, because if they don't, it's not going to be reflective of what's going to happen with them when they join the franchise, because they're kind of doing their own thing anyway. So those are just a few things. I think it's just, you have to pay real close attention to who you hire to help train and help basically bring those people onboard them and help them be successful, and really focus on that. I think if you bring on people too fast, what happens is you deplete your resources too quickly. You don't have enough people supporting them, and as a result, they're going to struggle, they're going to fail, and that's not going to reflect well in your brand going forward. So I have the right number of people, and as you hire people, know what those ratios are. That, okay, I need to hire this many people to support this many franchisees, and figure that out for your brand and how it works. It'll be a little bit different for every franchisor, because some brands, they require a lot more execution on different things. Other, they can just follow the system. But you do have to have a good understanding what that looks like and how to support your franchisees to help them be successful.
Yeah, and as a new franchise founder, since this is new to you, you've never experienced franchising,
right?
You don't understand, or maybe I'm speaking for myself, I didn't understand the delicate balance between selling enough franchises and making sure that I had the staff to support it, right? There's a delicate balance. When you're new to franchising, you just think, okay, I'm going to franchise, I'm going to expand. For me, it was about being first to market, since our concept was new, the newest, new sector that we were creating. So I knew that somebody was going to copy us, and I didn't know how long the runway was going to be. So for me, it was speed to market. But at the same time, I was mindful to not sell too many, but truthfully, I really didn't know what that number was. I stretched my staff way too thin early on. I mentioned in my book too that I had some really nice people that their hearts were in the right place, but not everybody was the right person to support franchisees. I had one particular guy who worked on my ops team. He was coaching franchisees. I cringe just as I think about this, but I overheard him say, and I quote, "I don't care if you're making any money doing this. I care that you're operating the program correctly." And I overheard that. And obviously, needless to say, he wasn't with the company much longer after that. And that was his real belief, is that he was so focused on operations and he lost sight of why we were really in business. But my point is that as a new franchisor or founder, you really are, it's a little bit of a guessing game on how many to award and how many you can support. And typically you get to the point where you've awarded too many and like, I better back this off. But my point is too, I think, James, that as a leader, our role changes and we have to be ready to adapt to that as a franchisor.
Well, it's a different skill set, right? But like the great thing for me is that all business skills are learnable. Leadership is a learnable skill. You can learn. There's a lot of great books have been written on that, great teachers about that topic. But you have to understand some basic principles of that. John Maxwell, he's written a lot of books on leadership, fantastic author. He has a new book out right now called High Road Leadership, which is fantastic. It just came out about a month ago. It's really all about how to lead in a culture that divides. And it's a fantastic look at what the attributes need to be from a franchisor, from a perspective of someone who's leading, as well as what kind of people you want to have come in that have already some of those capabilities and resources themselves to be accountable, to be, to basically lead by example, those kinds of things. So I think it's just leadership is it's really influence. That's what John Maxwell says. Leadership is influence, nothing more, nothing less. Your ability to influence other people, whether that's influencing your first sale, hiring people that can actually go out there and sell your product or service for you, having people on the operations side who can take care of that customer once they come in, so they want to come back and buy from you again and again. Mm-hmm. But you have to be able to lead and teach people and inspire them to help them know how to be a better person, a better leader yourself.
Yeah.
So that might be something you want to consider if you're listening to this, that, hey, you should be thinking about what kind of leadership resources or tools am I reading and reflecting on to become a better leader myself. That's really critical that you're doing that. You constantly are reading and thinking about what's the next step. I talk about this principle a lot in my book, Franchise Growth Strategies. In chapter 2, I talk about how you should have an idea day once a month, or at least once a quarter at the very least. But what an idea day is a time for you to kind of get away from the business and think about the direction you're heading. Are you on the right path? Are you doing the things that are keeping you busy, but are not going to help you get to your end goal? Or are you on the right trajectory? That's kind of what you're really thinking about and analyzing. And part of that is leadership. Am I doing the right things to be a great leader, or do I need to hire more people? I know you talk about that in your book too, when you were kind of, before you hired your chief operational officer, you kind of growing, expanding your business, you take on a lot more sometimes than you're able to do yourself. And I think a great characteristic of great leadership is the ability to say, this is too much for me alone. I need to hire people to help me out that are stronger than me in this area. They can actually help me grow in this area. And great leaders have the ability to surround themselves with excellent people and accomplish great things together, a lot more than you could if you try to do it all on yourself. And I think sometimes that's just what's the right set of skills you need to learn from doing that. But I have an idea notebook, for example, that I keep around for me, that I write different things in. And so when I have my idea day, I take that book with me, and I also have a little folder that I have with articles I've stuck in there. And there's basically 7 different segments of that book that I kind of look at. The first page and the last page of that book are what's called the implementation list. What am I going to do next? That's what you have to be as a leader, is make decisions and actually get things done. So that's a key thing you want to look at there. The second tab I have in that book is advertising that works. What's actually working to get people drawn to you to want to do business for you? So if I look at something, if I see a commercial or I see an ad or I see something in franchising and it inspires or motivates me, I want to pay attention to what's behind that. What's causing me to want to take action on that? A great leader is the ability to look at other people and say, that's a great thing. I'm going to adopt that or use that myself, or that's not a good thing. I'm not going to do that in my business. So that's the third tab is, I think, is headlines at work. When you see an ad or you see something that's drawing people into their businesses, whether it's a competitor, competing franchise, or another franchise in a completely different industry than yours, what are things that they're saying to draw people into their funnel, into their looking at what they're doing? And so just study that. And I'm always jotting that down in my little book. Here's a headline that moves me, that makes me want to say, hey, I should pay more attention to this. The fourth category is that of powerful stories that move me. When you're a leader, you have to be able to tell great stories to inspire people. So if you have a whole library of stories you can pull from, so reminds me of this situation, I'm going to share this with people more because it helps them understand better how to do that. I don't know if you want to talk about the rest of the things in the book, but I'll just give you one example for me of great leadership is that of, most people are familiar with the guy who broke the 4-minute mile, Roger Bannister. He broke the 4-minute mile in 4 minutes in 1954, May of 1954. But a lot of people don't know how he actually did it. What he did is he actually hired two guys to be what are called pacers. The first guy was a guy named John Brasher, or his name was Chris Brasher, I'm sorry. And then the second guy was a guy named Chris Chataway. And those guys, they ran 2 laps with him. So the first guy, Chris Brasher, would run faster than him, faster than he could actually do himself, and his job was to keep up with that guy. Then when Chris Brasher started to get tired, then Chris Chataway would run him for the last 2 laps, and he would run faster than Roger Bannister's normal pace was. So he had to keep up with him.
Wow.
In the last 200 yards, then he actually picked up the pace and pushed through that boundary and was able to break the 4-minute mile at 3:59 and some seconds there. But the point, what I was saying is that story is inspiring because it shows you need to surround yourself with people who are great pacers, people who can actually help push you farther than you can go on your own. And that's really, I think, what leadership is surround yourself with pacers and recognize here's the problem, here's what I need to do, and here's how I need to get that put together. So those inspiring stories are so important for leadership, but inspire people to know what to do and how to operate based on those principles out too. The 5th tab I have in my idea book is list of businesses to pay attention to. So it's not just in franchising, look at all the other businesses out there in your industry. What are people doing that's really setting them apart? What's causing them to be successful with their business? So reading a lot about people, their businesses. You can read a lot about like on investors.com. There's a great little section on business and profiles. You can learn what people are doing, and you get a lot of ideas from just letting what people in completely unrelated industries are doing to solve business problems they're having in their area. So that's a great thing to kind of look at as well. 6th thing is the list of ideas of things you could do for other people. Maybe that's someone that you think about, someone you could help. I think about Tom's, the guy who started Tom's, Blake Mykowski. He started this company where he basically gave 1 pair of shoes away to somebody else when people would buy a pair of shoes.
Oh, yeah.
And he did that idea for shoes. He did it for eyewear. And they gave away lots and lots of hundreds of millions of pairs of shoes and eyeglasses to people that didn't have those resources. Now they kind of changed their model a little bit. So they're kind of doing about 1/3 of all their profits go into these different charities or different causes to support. But that idea of 1 for 1 is so powerful that people think about that idea and say, how could I use that? So you could make a list of, here's all the things I'm going to do for myself, for my clients, for my franchisees, for my franchisors. What can I do? That might, as an emerging franchisor, that'd be a good list of who are my top franchisees? What can I do for them? What can I give to them? My middle franchisees, my ones that maybe struggle, but what can I do for them or help them with? And if you think about that list often, it gives you the ideas to put on your implementation list. You can actually reach out to them, call them and say, hey, I want to reach out to you and see how I can help you and support you and what you're doing in your business. So grateful to have you be a part of our franchise. And then the last tab I have in the book is just quotes that inspire me. So I have a quote book I carry with me all the time. I have a little book that like this, actually the book I have right here, and I have quotes in there. So when I'm reading a lot, I'll just jot a little thing down here. I have a little note card in here that I can pull out and write some ideas on. And then that goes into my thinking about my priorities and what I want to do as I kind of build my business as well. But that's a key thing, is to have an idea book or someplace you can kind of reference, go back to it again and again to help you know what to do to be a better leader. And an idea book or an idea day is a great way to implement leadership strategies and help you be more successful in your business.
Yeah, gosh, it's hard to unpack everything you just said because there's so much gold in what you just shared, James. I think from a founder's perspective, one of the key ways of making this all happen, first of all, is of course setting real time aside that you're going to do these things and get yourself out of the business, right? And stop working in the business. Right. And then the other part of that is because what you're really referring to is this is all about personal growth and personal development. That's what I'm hearing again and again. So Getting out of the office, getting out of the house, going to a personal development conference or seminar or somewhere where you're changing your environment, get out of the usual environment and get yourself into a community, whether it's, like for me, it was going to Tony Robbins events, and most of my major breakthroughs happened at a Tony event. And maybe it wasn't not necessarily just because of Tony, as amazing as he is and how much of an influence he's had on my life. The fact is that I was getting out of the office to create some of these things because I wasn't like dealing with the obligation or dealing with, meetings and calls, and I made time for doing that by getting out of the office. I think that's so critical for people, especially starting out. Like for anybody that says, I don't have time to do it, when you agree, you don't have time not to do it. This is so important.
Yeah, I was going to say that you have to schedule that time.
Yeah.
And a lot of it, when you first started franchising, you're traveling a lot to go to conferences and things like that. So maybe book a day before or a day after, and you think about all the things you can implement from what you learned at that conference or what you're doing there. When I do idea days, a lot of times I actually go to a library, like a public library or something like that. I leave my phone in the car. No one knows where I'm at. and then I can actually get things done and work just in a block of time. So I have to get this completed before I can leave for lunch, or I have to get this done before I can come home for dinner. And you have those hours that you're blocked off and no one can get to interrupt you. And you have to take time to reflect and think about where you're going in your business and to be able to execute on a high level with leadership. That's a key component of that. But you have to have a way to organize your information you're studying and learning, and then you have to have a way to implement that and put it in process in your business.
Let's talk about this baffling statistic that it still gets me. I've been in franchising over 20 years now, and there's still 4,000 franchisors in business. 400 start franchising, about 400 leave annually, give or take. Why do you think that is? Why do you think so many people don't make it in franchising?
Well, I think if we all knew the answer to that, we'd all have that, we'd be able to bottle that and sell it, right? But I think there's different reasons for different cases. But I think part of the reason why I chose not to get into franchising was a piece of advice I got from a good friend of mine. He was been in business for a long time. I sat down with him and he asked me the question, what's the reason why you're getting into franchise? Is it to really expand your brand? Is it to help people be successful in the business? Is it to make money? What is the real reason? Mm-hmm. And if the reason is it's just to make money, there's lots of ways you can make money that are probably easier than franchising. But I mean, you can do that, but it takes a long-term commitment to stick with that and do it. I think the biggest answer to your question, though, is there's a lot of complexity, a lot of different issues that come in. There's so many legal complexities to the franchising space as well. Mm-hmm. Getting your FDD done, understanding most people have never done an FDD before. It's a very complicated document to get it registered in all the different registration states across the country. That takes time. And some people, they end up spending more money on legal fees before they even jump in their business, before they didn't have to hire more people, and they don't understand all the complexity behind that. So it does require a lot of resource to be able to and do this well, and have the right people that you can hire and have around you to help you grow your business too. Like anything, though, I think you have to be really good at sales. And in any business, if you don't have sales, you don't have much of a business very long.
Right.
Sales is the lifeblood of a business, right? If the blood stops flowing, the business stops growing, right? So you gotta know how to sell a franchise. So I think that's a key component. Mm-hmm. A lot of franchisors outsource that again, and there's a lot of great benefits for that. You don't have to worry about hiring a team, but again, they can bring people on too fast. It may not be the right people for you to be in the franchise, and they don't have enough people to support them. Again, there's a lot of reasons why that is, but I think the key thing is you have to think for yourself, what is my motivation for doing this? What do I really want to get out of this? And I think, again, your book, you give a lot of great insight onto how you made the decision to do I9 Sports and kind of grow that business and some of the struggles you have, because it's not an easy road to be a franchisor, mm-hmm. Not an easy road to be a franchisee either. It takes a lot of commitment, a lot of hard work, and a lot of learning and making mistakes and growing from those mistakes. Any business you're going to start, you're going to make a lot of mistakes. It's just better to make them as quick as you can, learn from them, and move on. But you are going to make mistakes. That's just a part of life. And learning how to adapt from those or bounce back from those mistakes is critical. Some people just don't adapt back very well from mistakes. They have something happen and they let those outside forces influence and they just give up. Like what happened with you. We talked about that chapter where you had all those different things happening at the same time.
Right.
It would have been easy probably for you just to throw in the towel and say, okay, I'm done. I've had enough of this. But you stuck with it and you persisted. And I think that's a really inspiring part of your book is what the persistence it takes to be a successful franchisor is really all found within the chapters and the pages of your book. It's really, really an impressive accomplishment you've done there with that book.
Well, thank you, James. I agree with you with the part of the ability or inability to execute is one of the primary reasons why I see so many of these emerging founders they fizzle out because they haven't made that commitment. They have one foot in their company-owned locations and they have the other foot in franchising, and they see how much money they're making with their, say, company-owned locations and like, gosh, this franchising thing is so hard to do. And when they kind of doing both things, it's easy to give up on franchising when you start facing some of those challenges. In my case, I burned the boats. I had to take the island because I sold I sold my company-owned location to fund my franchise effort. I had literally no choice but to make it. Now, I'm not saying this, I'm not suggesting people should sell their company-owned location to franchise. In fact, I think the exact opposite. I think that it's great to have a company-owned location that's cash flowing so you don't have the pressure of selling franchises to keep the lights on. But it's all about execution, right? Selling franchises, supporting franchise owners. But when you run into those tough times, you just keep moving ahead because that's life, right? That's business. It's going to be difficult.
Yeah. Well, I think it goes back to the point we made earlier about the E-Myth, right? A lot of people get into business, they're technicians, they're really good at operating the business, but they don't have the skill set for the vision and the managerial skills to be successful doing this. Franchising or being a franchisor requires a lot of skills for vision, a lot of skills for persistence, a lot of skills for managing an operation that you may or may not have developed yet when you were just with a technician of your business. You know how to run the business itself, and you have great systems for that. When you think about the systems you have in your business itself, there's a lot of systems you may not have, or they're not very adequate for what you do, especially as you grow quickly. And that's an important part, I think, too, is the system is a secret behind any business. You have to have good systems in place. And if you rely on the systems of your one business, they don't always translate well over to another business, especially a completely different concept like franchising or being a franchisor.
Yeah, no, I agree with you totally. Let's talk about the types of people that get into franchises. What do you think is the traits of somebody that is better suited to becoming a franchisee of an emerging brand versus somebody that would become a franchisee of a more mature?
Well, it's a great question. There's a Zoracle profile you can look at that kind of tells you your skill set and what you do. One of the things that identifies in there is how you make decisions. And if you like to do things the way that like an entrepreneur, a plug and play, or a brand new person, or if you like to have someone who's like more of an existing business model that's it's really well established, and so usually the best people, if they're more of an entrepreneur, partner, plug and play, that's usually the best person to be for an emerging brand. If they want to have something that's more established, they should be looking for the higher end of that side of the spectrum that have the systems and process in place, because an emerging brand's got to kind of figure out some of those systems along the way, because not all of them are put together. And as you know, you have to kind of establish some of that together. So hiring the right person who can help you put systems in place, help you evaluate that, get better at things, that's going to be a really important person. So it's partly the franchisor's responsibility to identify who those people are, but also I think from a franchisee's perspective, understand who that person is too. One of the things I'll just mention about that, Gino Wickman wrote a great book called The Entrepreneurial Leap. And in that book, he identifies the skills that it takes to be successful as a business owner. It's a very short book, but it's a fantastic book because it shows you what it takes to be a business owner. And if you can't take that little assessment he has in the middle of the book and say, okay, I'm a business owner, then probably being a franchisee may or may not be the right answer for you. But it does to identify the skill set it takes to be a business owner. It's a different skill set to be an entrepreneur. If you think about it, most people in college are taught how to be taught how to be employees. They're not taught how to be entrepreneurs.
Sure.
And so you learn all these different skills, how to work for somebody else, but you aren't really taught how to be an entrepreneur, how to be a business owner. That's a different skill set. Robert Kiyosaki talks about a lot of this in his book, The Cash Flow Quadrant. That a lot of people have the entrepreneurial mindset, but they don't have a business owner mindset or a big business owner mindset or an investor mindset. It's a completely different set of skills for all four different quadrants in what he calls the cash flow quadrant. I think that's a key idea you can think about too, is that do I have the right skill set? Am I just moving from one category to the next, where a lot of people who get into a business for themselves, especially a franchisee, they actually buy themselves a job as opposed to actually creating a business that can actually hire other people to help them run that business. And that's maybe may or may not be the right person of skill set for you, but you have to understand what your role in the business is going to be, how you're going to train people, how you're going to help them become the best at it. Because if you have a hard time training people, you have a hard time actually help inspiring people, you're not going to have that much retention with a business. I had an interview about a week ago with a franchisee that's she's in New York, actually. She's and she told me she has 100% retention ratio with all of her employees over a 9.5-year span. That's pretty impressive. Most franchisors or franchisees never have anything close to that. They're lucky if they have 50% retention. So I asked her what her secret was, and she said, I take care of my people. And she said, she runs a business in the like a made right franchise, actually, with premium service brands. But one thing she said to me was, she said she actually will call her. She asked after the job is done, she calls and said, "You get a tip." And if they did get a tip, she calls the client and says, "Hey, would you like to? How'd it go? They do a good job." They said, "Great job. So would you like to leave them a tip?" And she always works to get the tip, and she gives 100% of that tip to her employees. And so as a result, they know that she has their back. She's there to help them. And they don't want to go anyplace else because they've never had that experience anyplace else, any place they've ever worked before. And I think that's so important. The reason why she has 100% retention ratio, which is crazy in an industry like that, is because she takes care of her employees and her people. And that's true of any business. You got to take care of people that work for you and not just see them as a tool to help you get more money yourself, but how to help them be successful in their business and their life, what they want to do. And I think that's such a refreshing perspective from a franchisee to say, I want to help my help my employees succeed. I want to help. And I think everybody has that perspective. But when push comes to shove and things get hard, you got to pay your bills. Sometimes you're not always thinking about that as clearly as you should be. And that's a key consideration.
Yeah. Putting your employees first, she totally gets it. It reminds me of a story. There's a local entrepreneur here in the Tampa Bay area who has a chain of restaurants who's been highly successful. My wife and I invested in him years ago. And when I first met him, my question to him was, how hard is it to, have really good staff here in the restaurant? And he looked at me like he was so surprised. You think of the turnover in restaurants,
Yeah.
and he was just like, I don't have any problem with turnover. He's like, I take care of my people. And he's like, yeah, we have no problem whatsoever with staff. And he has that consistency. But the thing is, more so than the compensation, he takes care of his people. And not enough, I don't think not enough entrepreneurs think about how they need to take care of their employees first. Because if you take care of your employees, they'll take care of the customers. That's
key.
right. Isn't that the order is often a challenge where people think, oh, okay, but the customers are always right. Customers come first, but it's not. It's your employees first.
Yeah, absolutely. Great point.
Let's talk about how this franchising landscape has been evolving. What do you think are some of the trends that you're seeing in franchising, specifically in the emerging area of franchising?
Oh, that's a hard question, and there's so many different avenues we could go down and talk about. I think you just have to think about who you're selling to is probably always a good question to ask yourself, and think about, am I selling to the right person? Especially when you have ups and downs of the economy, that's a great question to ask. Am I selling to the right person? You have this. One of the things I talk about in my book, Franchise Growth Strategies. I talk about this in the book about how you have to think about geographic regions. Usually, with a franchise, you have a territory you're selling. And you want to understand, as a franchisor, do you have the right size of territory? Can people be successful in that kind of a territory with your business model? As a franchisee, you might say, okay, we're going to pull people. If my territory is big and my area is like an hour out, how am I going to get people to come to my physical location? How am I going to get people out there to be a technician and go do work on that home or whatever needs to be done, whatever kind of business it is you're doing? So what can you do to incentivize people to do business with you from farther distances away? Well, they want to come to you. What are you doing that way? A lot of times it's referred to as up, down, and different. So can you go up? Like in the last recession, I think there's lots to study from that. You look at like companies like Walmart or QVC or Costco, they did a lot of reaching up to more affluent customers to find people that had money to be able to spend, who were both willing to buy and able to buy. That's critical. I think like the last recession, one of the most interesting lessons I learned from the last recession was Harley Davidson, who sells motorcycles. They started these women's garage clubs. And you wouldn't think that when you think about people driving Harley Davidsons down the road, you don't typically think of a group of women driving together, but they've kind of changed the whole business by selling to somebody different that didn't really think about that. So most people, they think about what the Harley Davidson brand, it's all about independence. And so you have a lot of women who have that same mindset, same values. And so what they did is they started having these garage parties where they invite women to come to these all together, and they would train and teach them how to use motorcycles, how to go out and ride together. And they would actually create this whole affinity for people wanting to be a part of that. And they sold a lot of motorcycles in the middle of the recession because they kind of focus on a different audience. So that's a great question to think about and look at. So kind of thinking sideways, who else am I missing in my market that I haven't been paying attention to? The other thing is just who are my top customers? When the economy shifts and changes, as it always does, it happens all the time, or your competitors come in, they might take them to your business. You should be asking yourself the question, who are my top 5 or 10%, or let's just first off, who are my 20% of my top customers? What am I doing for them? How can I get them to come back and do more business with me? 5 or 10% of the customers. I look at people like premium service brands or authority brands or a 5-star franchise who have multiple brands under the same umbrella. What they're doing is they might do a painting job for one person. They end up doing other services for them as well. So they're kind of cross-promoting, like Paul Flick, who I'm sure you know, with premium service brands. He has started a new app called Nesto, where they actually offer promotions to their existing franchise customers. Just for when they do one job, they offer them promotions on other things. Or they say, look, if you go get a bid from somebody else, upload the bid into the app, take a picture of it, upload the app, and we'll give you an offer on our services that's complementary within our suite of brands that we do. I think that's a fantastic idea, looking for ways to serve the audience in different ways. So then look at that top 20% of the customers. Who are the top people within that, the first top 5 or 10% of customers? What can you do to serve them and get more business from them and work with them too? And then just design special promotions or offers or celebrate an experience that they have with them, where they come and do something directly. Like within franchising, when you do a home services thing, you could have a block party that you could throw in that area, and they could come and answer questions about that and celebrate the fact they got their house painted, or they just put it in the pool, or whatever it is you do for them within your brand, and that you can have all people that come to that. You provide food, and then you have someone there who talks about why you should hire this service for me and my business. That's a great example of what you can do there. So I talk about that a little bit in the book too, about how to sell a bit differently in the situations like that too. So as situations in the economy changes, it shifts a little bit, and it's doing that. What are you doing to stay in front of the customers to show them why they should hire you and utilize your service as opposed to going someplace else? You have to stand out. And there's so much competition today that's a big thing I talk about in my book, Franchise Growth Strategies, in chapter 1. It's all about the fact that there's so much competition today. How are you standing out? How are you going to be in a position where you can be more successful doing that? That's the key thing. Help the franchisees succeed by understanding the basic economy principles of how to structure an offer and make something really attractive. People want to buy that. And then that will help you as a franchisor make money on the royalties because you'll help them succeed as they grow and scale their business as well.
Yeah. And James, the timing of what you're saying is so critical because you've got to take care of your customers, of course, in any economy. But if you're running a mediocre business in a good economy, you can survive. But as soon as the economy turns and we go into a recession, it's going to happen right eventually at some point.
Yeah, at some point. Yeah.
And this is going to look like for those people who were not in franchising in 2009, 2010, a lot of mediocre franchisors that had no business franchising went out of business because they couldn't survive a bad economy.
Yeah, you have to help your franchisees succeed. And that's a key thing about constantly thinking about that. How can I help my candidates be more successful? I think that's so important. You never think about that enough. I think going back to what we were talking about before about what's different about selling today with franchises. It used to be, I think, that people might come into a franchise. It might be if you're a scale of 1 to 100, like I'm not going to buy a franchise at all. To 100, I'm ready to buy my franchise, and here's my deposit, or here's my franchise fee. And I'm going to wire it to you today and sign my franchise agreement. Most people used to come in at a 50. I want to be a business owner.
Wow.
And they wanted to be, maybe they came in at 50. I think in the last few years, that's come down to a 25 or 30, or sometimes a 10. But they're just not sure if they even want to be a business owner. And you have to, what that basically means is that franchise salespeople have to be better at moving them from a 10 all the way to 100 versus 50 to 100. That's a different skill set and it takes a lot more patience and a lot more perseverance. But you really have to have a conversation around, why are you getting into business for yourself? What's important about that to you? What's your motivating factor? Is it your family? Is it something you want to do in the future? The better you understand that, the more successful you'll be at selling franchises. My goal is to know 3 things more about someone when I'm selling a franchise to them than any other person they talk to. If I know the 3 things about them different, they're going to like me, they're going to trust me more, they're going to do business with me. If I don't take the time to learn those other things about them that other people may not be paying attention to, it's a lot harder to get them to go from a 10 or 20 up to 100 from a 50. But if I know more every time I meet with them and talk with them, I get more excited about their business, starting the business. That's going to be a key component for being successful at selling franchises as well.
James, why do you think that score is so low right now?
Well, I don't know if it's true for every franchise. I think some franchises, it could be a lot higher. So a part could be PR. If you see some franchises that are emerging really fast, like you look at, like for example, the Rolling Suds franchise, they're growing really quickly. They've operated, and I've had Aaron Harper on my podcast before as the CEO of Rolling Suds. And I think they've done a great job of building their brand around an idea that you can build a great business around this. And they've got people coming in who are more excited about the business because of that promotion, that PR, those kinds of things. And basically the marketing he's doing for the franchise brand. He's always, every single day as the owner of that company, is promoting the franchise brand. If you follow him on Instagram or you follow him on LinkedIn or on Twitter or X, you can see he's constantly promoting what their business has become, what they're doing, helping the franchisees be successful, how many new franchises they've added, how many people are buying additional locations because they're starting to succeed in their primary market. That's a critical skill set. Most franchisors are not paying enough attention to that. And they're just saying, hey, franchise development team, go out there and sell out a franchise today. Or FSO, sell out a franchise for us today.
Right.
They're not thinking about, what am I doing to make it exciting to be a part of the brand? Your brand has to stand for something. They have to see that it means something to be a part of your franchise brand. If you're not doing that on a daily basis, or at least a weekly basis, but as often as you can, you're missing the boat. Someone else is going to take advantage of that. They're going to come in, they're going to have people enter in their franchise discovery process at a 50 or 60, whereas you're at a 10 or 15 because you're not paying enough attention to that. You've got to pay attention to that and get people to that 50 level or 60 level. You'll be it's a lot easier to go from 50 to 100 than it is to go from 10 to 100. A lot of times people will be out of the discovery process by the time they get to 40 or 50, if you're really low.
Right. Oh, well, Aaron has done a really good job of creating a community.
Yeah,
That's what he's
exactly.
really done. The ecosystem that he's created with Rolling Suds has been impressive in a really short time. But not everybody could do what he's done too. And let's face it, he has a massive team and support structurally that most emerging franchisors don't have.
Yeah, but it's still pretty impressive that he found an existing brand and
Totally
has built up
impressive.
so many locations. I mean, just under 200 locations in a little bit about a year and a half, basically. So it can be done, but that's what he's paying attention to, is how to get people excited about the brand before they even get to the discovery process.
Yes.
Most franchisors wait for the FSO to do that for them, or for the broker to do that for them. and they're not paying enough attention to what they're doing themselves to say, man, it's exciting to be a part of this brand.
Right.
It's exciting to be a part of what we're doing here. We're changing lives. We're making things happen. And power washing is not the most exciting industry, but he's done a great job of making it super exciting.
Absolutely.
And I think that's a great model to follow, an example to follow that you should put into your idea book. If you don't know who he is, go follow him, start paying attention to what he's doing, because he's doing remarkable things in his space.
Yeah, he's gotten in front of it for sure. I think he's done a great job. Cool.
Yeah.
James, what's been your biggest surprise in franchising over the last few years?
Wow, that's a question too. Well, I think it's just, well, I'll just make this observation. Some franchisors I've witnessed they pay more attention to their FDD in some areas, and they pay less attention to areas that really matter. And that is always surprising to me, how much emphasis is put on the FDD. An FDD is a legal document, but man, some franchisors sure make it boring to read. It needs to be a bit more of a sales document. You need to have more information about why it's exciting to be part of a brand.
Right.
I've seen a lot of franchisors who really struggle because they make it so much of a legal document. There's so much data in there, so much analytics in there, that it's impossible for someone to figure out what's actually in the document, what the brand is all about. I think when I first got into franchise sales and learning about franchising, that document intrigued me because it's so complicated and there's so much in there that could be done incorrectly, or that you just leave a list of all your franchisees to call, and some people call and they might be excited about the business, but after they talk to a couple of franchisees who maybe aren't doing that well, they just say, I'm out, and you have to have a good process, how you lead people through that discovery process, how you do a validation process is kind of really key, because most franchisors are like, I can't say anything about my business, I can't talk about what people are making. Well, your franchisees can, so make sure you're doing things to help people get in front of those franchisees that are doing well,
right,
to sell your business and be excited about it. That is probably the thing that surprised me most about franchising, is how important that document is to make franchise sales, but how little attention. It's just like, okay, it's time to get the FDD done, get it through, get the attorney, get it done, sign off on it. Okay, it's done. You're not paying enough attention to the mechanics of why that document is so important to sell. This is what this document actually shows you. Here's how to figure out like money you can make in the business, we're actually doing, and then here's the franchisees you should be talking to that are at these different levels of experience. And so people get the insight they need from that to make a decision whether they should buy a franchise or not. I think that's really important.
That is a great point, James. I've done over 100 podcast episodes in the past year, and I don't think once we have really talked about the power of the FDD. And I'm kind of thinking back on when I started as a new founder. What do? You get you have a franchise consultant that says you need to get to a franchise attorney who's going to do your FDD. I had no idea what to expect. I didn't know what I could do, what I couldn't do. And I had a franchise attorney that developed a really strong FDD. Most franchise attorneys don't think about selling franchises. They think about protecting your butt.
Right, exactly.
So they don't think of it as a selling tool. In fact, I know there are some people that really believe the FDD is not a selling tool and it should not be written that way. No, but at the end of the day, as you get more comfortable as a founder and you do enough renewals, you realize, wait a minute, there is quite a bit of latitude of what I can create in the FDD, staying within the framework where, yes, it can be a selling tool. And I agree with you. I think that the problem with the FDD when you're starting out as a founder, you don't really know what you can and can't do. So you just listen to the attorney. So number one, maybe as a founder, you need to interview different franchise attorneys before you hire one. And one of the questions is asking what their belief is on the FDD, and do they consider that a selling tool, and how do they allow that ability to be creative, and see if you connect with that franchise attorney. And then secondly, as you get more comfortable with being in franchising, continue to grow and develop and changing that FDD so that it becomes, you can feel and read the culture of the business through it. Because I really feel like over years, I know looking back at my franchise disclosure document today, it's made up truly of anecdotal stories of problems that we had in the past that we said, we're never going to let that happen again. And so I can go through the FDD and say, this was because of what happened in 2007 in South Florida. This happened in Seattle, Washington in 2010, and I can go through it. But there is an ability, though, to be very creative with the FDD and stay compliant.
Yeah, and that's the key thing. You're always going to stay compliant, but you can say it in the perspective of someone who's reading that. They're having to read that document too and be like, man, this is slog to get through. It's just, FDDs are super exciting to read. They're even more exciting, I think, to write. But you have to have the insight to think, what is someone going to think when they read this document? Are they going to say, this is a business that's going places, or this is a business that's trying to protect their butt and also saying about all the problems they've had? You want to be looking to the future in that document. What are you going to do? This is an item 19 in particular. Here's what our business shows that we accomplished and did. But also in talking about expenses, potential expenses, here's ones that are probably going to be applicable to you. Here's ones that are not applicable to you. And your sales team should be promoting those kinds of things that are differences and have them talk to franchisees who are different levels of the business. They can say, okay, here's someone in our top third, here's our middle third, here's our bottom third. If you want to talk to franchisees, here's what you should be focusing on. What kind of business do you want to have? Do you want to have a business that's high growth? Do you want to have a business that's kind of mediocre or average, or an average business, or a mediocre, doing very well business? Right. And most people want to have the very best business. So if you want to talk to people that are doing the very best in the franchise. The people who are struggling, the reasons why they're probably struggling are these different reasons. They're not putting enough full-time effort into it. They're not putting money into marketing. They're not actively growing the business. They're trying to do too many different things. They're trying to live their life, live their job, but not really run the business. So you have to ask yourself what kind of a business you want to have. But I think franchisors really have to pay attention to that document and think about, what are we doing to get people excited about this business from what's in the FDD? Mm-hmm. You can talk about your values, you can talk about your mission statement. All those things can be put in the FDD, but it really speaks to who you are and what you're all about, as opposed to just having a bunch of legalese in there and your franchise agreement, because it's required by law to have that. That's great, and operate within that, but make sure you're talking about who you are and what you stand for, so that when someone reads through that, let's say, man, I'm excited about this business even more because of what I read in this, as opposed to, well, some franchisees, or some franchisors are like, I don't want to talk about this stuff that's in the FDD because it's too depressing. Whatever it is, you got to make it exciting for people to want to be a part of your business. And that's a document that can do that, or it can shoot you down because of the experiences you've had. So you have to make sure you're promoting yourself in the right way.
That's great stuff, James. All right. I've enjoyed our conversation today, James. A question for you. If someone wanted to get some more information and work with you, how can they get a hold of you?
Well, my email is james@franchisesalesAssociation.com. That's probably the easiest way to do that. You can go on Amazon. You can buy my book, Franchise Sales Growth Strategies, there. I have a podcast called Franchise Sales Secrets, about how to sell franchises more specifically. You can listen to that if you want to. But if you'd like to help, just reach out to me, james@franchisesalesAssociation.com. I'm happy to chat with you and see if I can be of service or help to you as you grow your business, for sure.
Sweet. Well, thank you so much. Okay, I end every podcast with the franchise tip jar because the community is so generous. So, James, what do you got for me? Before I franchise my concept, what would be maybe a tip or trick or strategy you'd suggest before I go ahead and franchise my company?
Well, I think just what I said earlier, just ask yourself the question, is this really the right thing for me to do? Why am I making this decision? Is it because I want to impact other people's lives and to have the same experience I've had for being a business owner? Or is it because you want to make as much money as possible? Making money is a great thing, don't get me wrong, but you have to have the desire to serve other people first. Like Zig Ziglar said, if you want to accomplish, you can accomplish anything you want to in life if you just help other people accomplish what they want to first. And that's the key thing.
Fantastic. James, thanks so much for being on the show. I appreciate it. It was great seeing you again.
You bet. Glad to do it. Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you for tuning into the Emerging Franchise Brands podcast. For additional insights, guest applications, and to stay connected, visit us at efbpodcast.com. The Emerging Franchise Brands podcast is for entertainment purposes only, and the views expressed do not necessarily represent those of Emerging Franchise Brands, its host Frank Fiume, or Emerging Franchise Group, LLC. Any discussed franchise or investment opportunity requires thorough investigation, obtaining proper disclosure documents, and expert consultation before making any investment decisions. The podcast and its host do not offer professional advice or endorsements, and they hold no responsibility for actions, representations, accuracy, or consequential damages related to the podcast content.